都让想让
岁呀！我怎么不听啊？你们不着急啊？管什么什么家属呢
？Our thoughts and prayers are with the bereaved families affected.
These movements are consistent with deliberate action by someone on the plane.
The operation has entered a new phase. The search was already a highly complex multinational effort. It has now become even more difficult.
My emotion is going through a roller coaster ride.
In the early hours of Saturday the 8th of March, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 vanished into the night. An hour into its journey came 4 words from the flight deck. OK, received, good night. And with that, it was gone. This programme will look back at the search so far and how it has expanded to cover 1/10 of the world's surface. We will also examine what we know about the pilots and the passengers on board and explore the theories of what might have happened to this plane on what should have been a routine flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Rescue teams from 25 countries are now involved in the search for the missing plane. Dozens of aircraft and ships are scouring the ocean for a sign, a clue, anything.
What we're doing is producing our best estimate of the most likely place to search, but I would hasten to add it is far from very precise.
The operation initially centred around the last known location of the aircraft. Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur Airport bound for Beijing on Saturday the 8th of March at 12:41 a.m. local time. The last transmission from the plane's onboard communication system, ACARS, was previously said to be at 7 minutes past 1. We've now learnt that it could have been switched off up to 30 minutes later. It has also been revealed that the last verbal contact from the plane to air traffic control was at 19 minutes past 1, 11 minutes earlier than previously said. And it has emerged for the first time as well that the last words from the cockpit were spoken by the co-pilot before the plane's transponder, which tracks it, was turned off. At 1:30 a.m, air traffic control in Kuala Lumpur spoke to the flight deck. "We've handed you over to Ho Chi Minh Air Traffic Control," was the message. "OK, received, good night," was the reply. It was the last anyone heard of them.
How difficult is your task?
Very difficult, and wherever we never give up, we try to search.
Whatever the fate of flight MH370, the pilots will have played some role. 53-year-old Zahari Ahmed Shah was the captain that evening. He is a vastly experienced pilot with more than 18,500 flying hours under his belt.
He was a volunteer in the community program that I organized. At the end of the program, there was this guy helping to stack chairs to clean up that place. And not having met him before, I asked, "Who is this man?" And I was told he works for Malaysian Airlines. I went to say thank you to him, and he introduced himself, giving me his name card. And when I saw he was a captain of a 777, that's the kind of humble person that Captain Zahari is.
Captain Zahari's family have now made and released this video asking for him to come home to them soon.
He was hired by Malaysia Airlines directly out of school and trained by Malaysia Airlines. He was one of the original 777 fleet captains. He's a great guy, just a great pilot. I think it attests to his experience. It was 18,000 hours of flying, great career.
The first officer was Fariq Abdul Hamid. He's 27 years old and joined Malaysia Airlines in 2007. He was fairly new to this model of aircraft, a Boeing 777-200.
Initial investigation indicated it was the co-pilot who basically spoke the last time it was recorded on tape.
CCTV shows the two men going through security on their way to board the flight that evening. We are told they did not specifically request to fly together that night. Police have started searching their homes, talking to friends and neighbours. This is Captain Zahari's house. On a smart compound on the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. His maid looks out of the door.
It's hard to believe that he would have been to do anything like that, or to, like the speculation of pilot suicide or a pilot hijacking. I just can't imagine with his character and what we knew of him. It just wouldn't make any sense that he would have anything to do with any sort of deliberate action on his part.
They found this simulator in Captain Zahari's house. The data on it is now being analysed for clues.
My emotion is going through what I call a roller coaster ride. When you hear of a potential answer, a positive answer, it goes up, and then there's no, it goes back down, and goes up and goes down. And yeah, it's difficult. And I can just sympathize with the families of the people involved now, because they must be going through much, much more difficult times.
His piloting skills would be great, and I think he would do anything he could to preserve the lives of his passengers and the cargo, the property of Malaysia Airlines. He was really proud of that company.
But the captain and co-pilot are not the only people who are on the plane to have come under investigation. Early on, two names stood out. An Austrian called Christian Kozel, the other an Italian called Luigi Moraldi. They shouldn't have been listed on the plane's manifest. They weren't on board. Their passports had been stolen in Thailand. It would appear that they had then been used by these two men, Puri Noor Mohammadi and Delavar Saeed Mohammed Reza, Iranians trying to claim asylum in Europe, but they have no known links to terrorism.
We know that once these two individuals arrived in Kuala Lumpur on the 28th of February, they boarded Flight 370 using different identities.
Inevitably, after all this time, and with no clue as to where the plane is, the Malaysian investigators are coming under scrutiny. They hold daily news conferences, but with no explanation. The frustration on all sides is growing. A week into the investigation, it was the Malaysian Prime Minister himself who announced the most dramatic development to date, which also effectively put the search back to square one.
It then flew in a westerly direction, back over Peninsular Malaysia, before turning northwest, up until the point at which it left military primary radar coverage. These movements are consistent with deliberate action by someone on the plane.
In In Beijing, some relatives have threatened to go on hunger strike if they don't get more information.
If the families had been allowed to speak to senior officials from the Malaysian government, I think they would have felt a little bit more reassured. Obviously, you can't imagine what they must be going through now. But if there was a dedicated team to look after their needs, including psychologists if necessary, and just to give a timely flow of information, whatever was possible, and to make sure their needs are tended to on the ground.
A former Malaysian transport minister has told Sky News that an international body should now take over the investigation.
The UN-sanctioned ICAO. ICAO stands for, is an acronym for International Civil Aviation Organization, and they do have their own independent investigation into any catastrophe of this nature, and maybe I think it's good to trigger this investigation, so that nobody would ever say that certain parties have something to withhold.
And so the search of the South China Sea is now over, but rescue teams now face the prospect of a new area, which is much bigger, much harder. This has become a criminal investigation, but is it a murder inquiry? For the first time since the plane went missing, the prospect that it has landed somewhere has become a genuine possibility. Next, who else was on board? We are now starting to learn about the personal stories behind the 227 missing passengers.
My emotion is going through a roller coaster ride.
These movements are consistent with deliberate action by someone on the plane.
What happened to Malaysia Airlines MH370 has continued to baffle the world. Rescue teams are searching an area more than 10 million square miles. But the task they face is daunting. Within that vast space, they are looking for an object which, even in one piece, is only 63 metres long. A Boeing 777 airliner. As the days go by without sign of the plane or a clue as to its whereabouts, the uncertainty is becoming unbearable for the waiting families. And we are also learning more about their loved ones, the personal stories of flight MH370. Could the manifest hold the answers? Investigators are scrutinising every name on it. They say, remarkably, they still haven't received details for each passenger after all of this time.
The passenger manifest is obviously very important. It enables you to identify all the persons that are on board the aircraft, and that obviously is important for the security of the aircraft.
But the Chinese authorities insist they have done their bit.
China has investigated the backgrounds of all Chinese passengers on board the missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 and has found no evidence suggesting they are linked to destructive behaviour on the aircraft. So we can rule out the suspicion that Chinese passengers are linked to a terror attack or destructive activities on the missing plane.
15 different nationalities were flying to Beijing that night. Among them, 153 from China, 38 from Malaysia, 5 Indians, 4 French, 3 from the United States, and 2 Iranians on board who became initial suspects but seemed to have been ruled out. 35-year-old Ju Kun is a stuntman who is due to start work on a new series of Netflix in Malaysia next week. He was on his way to Beijing to see his 2 young children. Bob and Kathy Lawton are from Springfield Lakes in Australia. They have 3 daughters and are described as doting grandparents. Salmat bin Omar has been waiting at a Kuala Lumpur hotel for any news. His son is an aviation engineer. He was on his way back to Beijing to repair private jets. Because he has obvious knowledge of aircraft, he too is now under suspicion.
When the news came about, it broke my heart because the aircraft was lost. It didn't fall, it didn't crash, it just disappeared. Yes, I understand, and we do hope that the investigators do investigate. In my opinion, all I know is that my son is an engineer for private jets and not huge Boeing planes.
Let's recap the plane's last known movements. Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur Airport for Beijing on Saturday the 8th of March at 12:41 a.m. local time. The last transmission from the plane's onboard communication system, ACARS, was previously said to be at 7 minutes past 1. We're now told, though, it could have been switched off up to 30 minutes later. It has also been revealed that the last verbal contact from the plane to air traffic control was at 19 minutes past 1, 11 minutes earlier than previously said. It has emerged for the first time as well that the last words from the cockpit were spoken by the co-pilot before the plane's transponder, which tracks it, was turned off. The next known location for the airliner came after it turned west. It was picked up on military radar over the Andaman Sea. After that, its location is unknown, but we do know that a satellite received a signal from the plane at 11 minutes past 8 in the morning from a distance that puts it in one of 2 flight corridors. According to new information, investigators believe that if the plane flew along the northern corridor, it would have reached from Laos to the Caspian Sea, depending on how fast it was flying. To the south, the search spans from Sumatra in Indonesia to the southern Indian Ocean, some of the deepest waters on Earth. We also know that the plane had enough fuel to fly for around 5 hours after it was last seen on radar off Malaysia. Depending on the altitude it was flying, that would mean it could have travelled anywhere within this range. It leaves a likely search area covering a huge swathe of the globe. Based on the data we know, it has been calculated that the plane could have landed at one of 634 runways in 26 countries across the region, if, that is, it was capable of doing so. But India, Pakistan, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan have said they didn't detect any suspicious aircraft movement in their airspace.
There's going to be some systematic searching by military reconnaissance aircraft, which, quite frankly, will be the best systems available. Much of the space technology is not necessarily directed at the area that the aircraft is believed to have gone down. And it's not necessarily going to be the right kind of space-based surveillance system to pick up the kind of debris or clues to the existence of a crashed aircraft. So I think it will rely very much on the numbers of maritime reconnaissance aircraft that are now flocking to help the Malaysians with their search.
With so little news as to the plane's whereabouts, the relationship between passengers and officials is getting worse by the day.
They've been avoiding their responsibilities and talking nonsense. There are a lot of contradictory answers to our questions. That makes us very angry. I'm angry that the Malaysians don't tell the truth. They lie to the whole world. I'm totally frustrated about this. Where is my son? Even taxis have GPS. They can be found if they are lost or stolen. It's a huge plane, so high-tech and so advanced. How could it not be found? It's a joke.
Paul Weeks is a mechanical engineer. He accidentally left his wedding ring and watch behind at home when he travelled to Mongolia for work. Hadrian Watralos on the right is 17. Chow Yan on the left, 18. Together, they were on their way to school in Beijing. The 34-year-old Hu Chao-ning was on his way home with his 3-year-old daughter, Hu Si-wan. There are 239 people missing, lost on flight MH370. These are the stories of just some of them.